Hey there, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the channel Logical Sentiment. Today I'm going to be discussing religious freedom and its impact on modern legislation. That is, its impact on the individual and any given institution. Now, while this has always been a bit of an issue, it's been popping up more and more given recent statements from certain politicians that could potentially impact the future of privileges given based on religious freedom. Obviously, we want to maintain a separation of church and state, and we've seen a lot of issues with historical governments and even a lot of modern ones around the world right now that are struggling with this issue. So it's a definite line we want to draw right there. But what we're going to be looking at today is not necessarily the church's influence over the creation of new legislation, but rather the individual or business entity's right to provide or deny services under the protection of religious freedom. So what specific issues are we going to be talking about here? There have been a lot of topics floating around. There have been prayers in schools, same-sex marriages, adoptions from religious institutions. And as the United States has been polled at around 75% Christian, it's understandable that many of the non-Christian minority can feel oppressed or victimized by these rights given under religious freedom. Right now, some of the more discussed areas in higher government are concerning healthcare and small business. In healthcare, in which there seems to be a lot of legal volatility right now, there's a lot of discussion regarding abortion, sterilization, and contraception, as well as their place in the modern healthcare system. For the purposes of this discussion, I'm going to go ahead and leave out any sort of moral arguments for or against abortion, sterilization, contraception, etc. Because as stated in the beginning of this video, it's purely looking at the impact of religious freedom on these actions. Though in the future, I may possibly create a video discussing the moral implications of abortion, contraception, etc. But like I said, for a future video, for now we'll just stick to the topic at hand. As we all know, abortion is currently legal in the United States. So the average U.S. citizen does have a legal right to have an abortion if they so choose. And obviously the same goes for sterilization and contraception. Everyone has a right to pursue and to use these options. But what's currently being discussed pretty heatedly is whether or not an institution has a right to exclude these services from their healthcare plan, and whether or not this exclusion is discrimination in either the sexual or religious form. One can definitely see how being denied access to a privilege to which you do have a right may seem like discrimination. But at what point does the right to access outweigh the opposite party's right to choose whether or not to provide a service? A level of discrimination can also be felt from one who, regardless of the reasoning, is forced to provide a service which they did not initially want to provide. Furthermore, it's also dangerous to have a government mandate that a private institution provides a service they don't wish to, whether it be for reasons of religion, morality, or simply just a lack of interest. It's definitely noted that it's a tough time out there finding health insurance currently. With factors like affordability and coverage on the line, it's hard to pick and choose based on these controversial issues. Now, it may seem unfair, and believe me, I can see the difficulty of the situation as presented to most individuals, but the bottom line is, it is immoral to force an institution or an individual to provide a service regardless of their reasoning to deny it. With this reasoning in mind, we can jump directly into the next topic of religious freedom in small business. We can see here that the same principle applies. It's not up to us or the government to decide when or under what conditions somebody should be allowed to conduct their business or provide their services. Say, for example, we had some angry guy open a business, say a bakery, and he decided, all right, I've got this bakery going, everyone's welcome, but no Jews and I guess no Muslims either. And the Jews and the Muslims are all like, hey, what the hell? It's infringing on our rights, and you have to service. Now, while this is a clear case of discrimination and it's a basic case against common morality, is it the government's job to jump in and force this man to sell his baked goods to these individuals? In my opinion, the answer is no. This man does have the right to perform his services when and where he would like to do them and under what conditions, provided he doesn't infringe on the rights of others. And obviously, these individuals do have a right to baked goods, but not necessarily a right to his baked goods. They are more than welcome to pursue other bakeries, one with less hate and one with somebody less angry running them. And honestly, if we're fully looking into this situation, some smart business guy, I guess, would probably open up a bakery next door, All he'd have to do is throw up a sign saying Jews and Muslims welcome, and he'd go ahead and outdo the guy's business, go ahead and make a ton of money for himself right there. As for the previous baker, I'd say his business would start to gain some sort of notoriety. He'd probably pop up on some local news stations. People would be snapping pictures of his customers. They'd wind up on social media, lose their jobs, etc. I'd say, the general point is that's just how capitalism works. Businesses are free to conduct themselves as they choose, and if they're not accepted on a societal level, it just won't work out, and they'll end up being shut down anyway for if anything, economical reasons. One of the main arguments against this point of view, and I guess while it's not directly related to religious freedom, it's a similar situation. It does pertain to the argument we're making. A lot of people like to point back to the Civil Rights Act and how it was a necessary change for American culture in the 1960s. And, I don't want to be the Hitler guy talking trash about the civil rights movement, but that being said, there are a few points I'd like to get across about it. The Civil Rights Act was probably a pretty necessary piece of legislation for its time. There was definitely a lot of negative racial sentiment going on during that period of the United States history. That being said, leading up to the act, there was a clear growing opposition to the racial ideals that the country held at that time and to the levels of discrimination that were being experienced by many minorities. And though this opposition was growing on its own, the main barriers it faced were separate but equal laws in the form of state and local legislation. Now, these laws were actual examples of institutional racism, as they were state-sponsored regulations that afforded different privileges to different American citizens based on the color of their skin. And because of this, they were obviously unconstitutional and had to be shut down by federal law. So the Civil Rights Act was passed, and it accomplished all this, as well it should have. But when its regulations were pushed into the private sector, that's when it technically became unconstitutional. And this is where it gets a little bit hairy. Nobody wants to be on the side of the racist business owner. Racist people are garbage, everyone knows that. Nobody wants to be the one to say, oh yeah, let that racist guy do whatever he wants. But the fact of the matter is that according to the Constitution, everybody in the United States is allowed to open a business and conduct it as they see fit, so long as they don't infringe on the rights of others. And as stated earlier, denying a service is not infringing on somebody's right. They still have the right to pursue the service, and just as much as you have the right to provide that service at your discretion. And essentially, this is the whole argument put into basic terms. I do what you got to do as long as you're not holding me back from doing what I want to do. Really, this goes back to some of the fundamental ideas of the United States of America. Every citizen is granted the right to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. The liberty of an individual and their search of a service should be protected just as much as the liberty of an individual or private firm and their providing or denying of said service. But I guess on that overly patriotic note there, I'll go ahead and cut off my rant, leave you poor viewers alone. But I'd like to go and encourage anybody who had an argument with any of my ideas or had any, insights they'd like to share, to leave a comment down below, kind of help me out. I'm still on the learning path. I'm more than happy to look at different points of view. So thanks for taking the time to check out this video, and we'll hopefully see you for the next one.